The bells of Westminster tolled with such solemnity that even the stones beneath my knees seemed to weep. I knelt in the front pew of the abbey, my white novice veil heavy upon my bowed head, watching as they bore King Edward's body toward the altar. The scent of frankincense and myrrh filled the sacred space, mingling with the whispered prayers of 1,000 souls come to bid farewell to their sovereign. I was but 19 summers old, having taken my preliminary vows at the convent of St. Catherine only 6 moons prior. Mother Abbess had chosen me among the few sisters to attend this most solemn occasion, for my voice was true in Latin chant, and my deportment without reproach. How little did she know that within this humble vessel dwelt a heart that had not yet learned to be still. The cathedral stretched before us like God's own palace, its soaring arches reaching toward heaven itself. Yet for all its magnificence, I found myself stealing glances not at the holy cross above the altar, but at the figure who knelt in the royal pew across the nave. Prince Henry, the king's eldest son and heir to the throne, bore his grief with the dignity befitting his station. His dark hair fell in waves to his shoulders, and though his head was bowed in prayer, I could see the strong line of his jaw, the noble set of his features. He wore black velvet, adorned with the royal arms, and upon his breast hung a heavy gold cross that caught the candlelight with each breath he drew. Requiem aeternam dona eis Domine, the archbishop intoned, and our voices rose as one in response. Yet even as I sang the sacred words, I felt as though I walked upon a precipice. Each time Prince Henry shifted in his pew, I found myself watching, waiting, hoping our gazes might meet across that sacred space. Such thoughts were sinful, I knew well. I had pledged myself to be the bride of Christ, to forsake all earthly desires. Yet, as the Mass continued, and the incense grew thick about us, I could not banish the warmth that spread through my chest when I looked upon him. As we rose for the final blessing, I kept my eyes downcast, as befitted my station, following Mother Abbess toward the great doors. But as we passed the royal pew, something compelled me to lift my gaze just once more, and there, as if he had been waiting for that very moment, Prince Henry's eyes met mine. The look we shared lasted but a heartbeat, yet in that instant, I felt as though lightning had struck the very core of my being. His eyes were the deep blue of twilight, and in them I saw a recognition that matched my own, as though we were two souls who had found each other across an impossible distance. That night, as I lay upon my narrow cot in the novices' dormitory, I stared up at the rough wooden beams and relived that single, searing moment. I told myself it meant nothing, yet deep in my heart, I knew that something had awakened within me that would not easily be put to rest. The days that followed brought the familiar rhythm of convent life. I threw myself into my duties with renewed fervor, hoping that devotion might quiet the restlessness that had taken root in my soul. I spent long hours copying passages from the holy books, my quill scratching against the parchment as I transcribed the words of the saints who had conquered their earthly desires through prayer and mortification. Yet even as I wrote of divine love and heavenly reward, my treacherous mind would wander to those twilight eyes in that moment of recognition. It was Sister Margaret who brought word that the new king would be visiting our convent within the fortnight. "We shall clean every stone, polish every candlestick," Mother Abbess declared. "His Majesty's visit is a great honor to our house." My pulse quickened at the news, though I dared not show it. For 10 days we prepared, and I told myself that my eagerness to perfect every detail was born of holy devotion, yet I could not deny the flutter in my stomach when I imagined seeing him again. The king's retinue arrived on a morning bright, with autumn sunlight. We novices were arranged in the courtyard, our heads bowed in humble welcome as the great wooden gate swung open. "Welcome, Your Majesty, to the humble house of St. Catherine," Mother Abbess said. "We are honored beyond measure by your presence." "The honor is mine, good mother," came the reply, and at the sound of that deep, resonant voice, my heart nearly stopped. "I come seeking the prayers of your holy community and the blessing of God upon my reign." I kept my eyes fixed upon the stones at my feet, yet I could sense his presence like warmth from a great fire. When Mother Abbess began introducing the novices, I tried to calm my racing pulse by reciting the Ave Maria silently. "And what is thy name, child?" His shadow fell across me, and I lifted my eyes to his, feeling once again that shock of recognition pass between us. "I am called Sister Marguerite, Your Majesty," I managed to whisper. "Sister Marguerite," he repeated, and the sound of my name upon his lips sent warmth flooding through my veins. "How long have you dwelt within these holy walls?" 6 months, Your Majesty. I have not yet taken my final vows." Something flickered in his expression at these words. "Then you have chosen well, to dedicate your life to God's service. I shall remember you in my prayers." That evening we gathered in the chapel for Vespers, with the king and his courtiers in attendance. As we sang the ancient psalms, I found myself acutely aware of his presence. During the reading, I dared to glance back once, and found his eyes fixed not upon Father Benedict at the lectern, but upon me. After the service, as we passed through the cloister, I felt a touch upon my arm, light as a feather, yet burning like a brand. "Sister Marguerite," came the whispered voice, and I turned to find King Henry standing in the shadows of an archway. "Might I speak with you a moment?" I glanced about in alarm, but the other sisters had already passed out of sight. To be discovered alone with any man would mean severe punishment. To be found thus with the king himself would likely result in my immediate expulsion. Yet, I could not seem to make my feet carry me away from him. "Your Majesty, I should not," I began, but he stepped closer, and the words died upon my lips. "Forgive me," he said quietly. "I know 'tis wrong of me to speak thus to one who has pledged herself to God. Yet since first I saw thee at my father's funeral, I have been unable to forget thy face. The admission struck me like a physical blow. Your Majesty speaks words that I should not hear," I whispered, yet I made no move to flee. "Tell me true, do you feel nothing when you look upon me? Have these weeks passed without a single thought of that moment when our eyes first met?" I should have lied. Instead, I found myself speaking the truth. "I have thought of little else," I confessed. "Each night I have prayed for forgiveness for such thoughts, yet still they come." The smile that spread across his features was like sunrise after the longest winter night. "Then I am not alone in this madness. But we must not speak of such things," I said desperately. "I have made vows, preliminary vows only," he interrupted gently. "There is yet time to choose a different path." The sound of footsteps in the cloister made us both start. King Henry stepped back into the deeper shadows. "Tomorrow evening, when the bell rings for Compline, meet me in the rose garden behind the scriptorium," he whispered urgently. "The moon will be dark, and none will see us there. I cannot promise. I shall wait for you there whether you come or not. For you are already written upon my heart, Marguerite." With that, he melted back into the shadows, leaving me alone with my racing pulse and the terrible certainty that I had already fallen far further than any prayers might restore me. The next day passed with agonizing slowness. As evening approached, I found myself torn between desperate hope and equally desperate fear. The bell for Compline rang across the convent grounds, calling the sisters to their final prayers. I knelt with the others in the chapel, but the familiar Latin words seemed to mock me. Yet when the service ended, I found my feet carrying me not toward my dormitory, but toward the rose garden. The autumn air was sharp against my cheeks, and clouds scudded across the sky, hiding the stars from view. I stood among the bare rose canes, pulling my woolen cloak tight about my shoulders, wondering if I had lost my mind entirely. Then I heard soft footsteps on the gravel path. "You came?" King Henry said softly as he emerged from the shadows. "How came you to take the veil at so young an age?" "My parents died of fever when I was but 16, I replied. "I had no family, no dowry to attract a husband. The convent offered shelter and purpose." "And did you never dream of love?" The question cut straight to the heart of longings I had tried so hard to suppress. I told myself that such dreams were selfish, that God's love was greater than any earthly affection. And now I begin to wonder if perhaps I was wrong. He cupped my face between his hands then. "Sweet Marguerite, you speak of damnation, yet when I look upon you, I see nothing but heaven itself. But what future could we have?" I whispered desperately. "You must marry for the good of the realm. I am nothing. You are everything," he replied fiercely. "These past weeks I have tried to put you from my mind, yet your face appears in my dreams. I have never known such torment, or such joy." Before I could protest further, he lowered his head and pressed his lips to mine. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but when I did not pull away, it deepened into something that seemed to ignite my very soul. I had never been kissed before, had never even imagined what it might feel like. Yet in Henry's arms, I felt not corruption but a kind of sacred communion. When we finally broke apart, I was trembling. Henry rested his forehead against mine, his breathing as ragged as my own. "What are we to do?" I asked. "I must return to court tomorrow," he said reluctantly. "But this is not the end. I swear to you, I shall find a way for us to be together." "How?" "You are the king. A king may choose his own queen." "Give me time, Marguerite. Trust that what we have found here is worth fighting for." The bell tower chimed the hour, reminding us both how dangerous our meeting had become. "I must go," I said reluctantly. "Will you wait for me? However long it takes. Will you wait?" "I will wait," I promised, sealing the vow with another kiss that tasted of moonlight and impossible dreams. The king's party departed the next morning after Mass. I stood with the other novices in the courtyard, my eyes downcast, yet I felt the weight of his gaze upon me like a physical touch. The weeks that followed were the longest of my life. I threw myself into my duties with desperate fervor, hoping that hard work might quiet the yearning in my heart. Yet nothing could banish the memory of Henry's arms around me. Then Sister Margaret brought word of the king's betrothal. King Henry was to marry Princess Isabella of Castile, cementing an alliance between England and Spain. The wedding would take place at Christmas. I felt as though the very earth had opened beneath my feet. Had our night in the garden meant so little to him? Had I been merely a passing fancy? That evening, as we gathered for Vespers, I could barely force the words of the Psalms past the constriction in my throat. After the service, I walked alone in the cloister. It was there that Brother Thomas approached, pressing a small roll of parchment into my hand. "A rider brought it to our abbey with gold enough to ensure its safe delivery," he whispered. I hurried to the scriptorium and broke the seal with trembling fingers. The letter was brief. "My beloved Marguerite, by now you will have heard of my betrothal. Know that my hand was forced by matters of state. Raiders from the north threaten our borders, and the Spanish alliance provides ships and gold we desperately need. But hear me well. This marriage of convenience changes nothing of what lies between us. My heart belongs to you. When the wedding ceremonies are concluded, I shall find a way to bring you to court. Guard well what we have shared, and trust that love will find a way. Your devoted Henry." Wrapped within the parchment was a small silver pendant, a rose in full bloom, set with a tiny ruby at its heart. There was also gold enough to purchase my freedom from the convent many times over. I burned the letter as he had instructed, but I kept the pendant, hiding it beneath my habit, where it rested against my heart, like a secret promise. The royal wedding took place as planned. Each detail was like a knife to my heart, yet I listened with outward composure. In my darkest moments, I wondered if Henry had already forgotten me. But then, just after Epiphany, Brother Thomas appeared again, with another sealed message. "Beloved, throughout the ceremony, 'twas your face I saw beneath the bridal veil. My queen is fair and gracious, but she is not you. I write with news. Her Majesty wishes to establish a new holy house near the royal court. If Mother Abbess were to recommend certain novices for this work, particularly one known for her skill with manuscripts, such sisters might find themselves serving very near to London. Trust in my love and in God's providence. Ever yours, Henry." Within a fortnight, I was traveling toward London, my heart full of hope and fear in equal measure. The new foundation was established in a manor house near Richmond. It was far cry from the austere walls of St. Catherine's, warm brick with leaded windows and gardens laid out with mathematical precision. I was assigned to oversee the scriptorium, teaching young noble ladies to illuminate manuscripts. It was pleasant work, but I found myself starting at every sound of hoofbeats, wondering when Henry might visit. Queen Isabella announced that she wished to spend Holy Week at the foundation, accompanied by the king and court. When the royal party arrived on Palm Sunday, I stood with the other sisters, my heart hammering as I watched Henry dismount. When his eyes found mine across the courtyard, I saw not the King of England, but the man who had held me in a moonlit garden. The week was an exquisite form of torture. Henry was constantly present for prayers and meditation, yet always with his queen and courtiers nearby. I caught him watching me during the long services, and once our voices rose together in perfect harmony that seemed to speak what our lips could not. It was on Maundy Thursday, during the ceremony of washing feet, that our chance came. As Queen Isabella moved on to the next woman, Henry contrived to approach. "Sister Marguerite," he said quietly as he passed behind me. "The yew maze in the east garden. When the bell rings midnight." The hours crawled by. When at last I heard the bell tower chime midnight, I wrapped my darkest cloak about my shoulders and slipped through the corridors toward the garden. I found Henry waiting in the heart of the maze, where a stone bench sat beneath a carved sundial. He wore simple dark clothing and rose as I approached. "You came," he breathed, drawing me into his arms. "Sweet Marguerite, how I have longed for this moment." "As have I whispered against his chest. "Yet I fear we court disaster meeting thus, with your queen sleeping so near." We are safe here, for a little while at least. He drew back to look at me, his hands cupping my face. Tell me true. Are you happy in your marriage? Does she please you? A shadow crossed his face. She is all that duty required. She will make a good queen, and bear strong sons for England. But Marguerite, she is not you. When I lie beside her at night, 'tis your face I see in the darkness. Then we are both condemned to live with divided hearts. Not condemned, he corrected. What we have found together transcends the bonds of marriage or the vows of religion. He lowered his head and claimed my mouth with a kiss that poured all his frustrated longing into the space between us. I melted against him, my hands fisting in his cloak as I gave myself over to the desperate sweetness of the moment. When we broke apart, both of us were breathing hard, and I could feel tears sliding down my cheeks. This cannot continue, I whispered. To meet thus, to touch and kiss when we can never truly be together, 'tis torture beyond endurance. Then what would you have me do? He asked raggedly. I know not, I confessed. I know only that to love you as I do, when you belong to another, feels like a betrayal of everything I once believed. Henry was quiet for a long moment. There might be another way. In France there is an ancient tradition, courtly love, where a knight might serve a lady with perfect devotion while maintaining the boundaries of propriety. We could love with our hearts and souls rather than our bodies. And how long do you think we could maintain such restraint? I asked quietly. Already, meeting thus in secret, we push against the boundaries you speak of. He sighed, recognizing the truth in my words. I know it would not be easy. Yet what alternative do we have? The sound of footsteps on gravel made us both start. Henry pressed me back into the shadows. Your Majesty, came Sir Edmund's voice. We saw you leave the manor house and grew concerned for your safety. I could not sleep, Henry replied calmly. I thought a walk in the garden might quiet my restless thoughts. 'Tis dangerous to walk alone at night. Sire, you speak wisely. I shall return to the house at once. As the voices retreated, I remained frozen in my hiding place. Only when the garden had been silent for a long while did I dare emerge and make my way back to my cell. The next morning brought Good Friday. We gathered in the chapel for the reading of the Passion, and I found myself deeply moved by the words describing Christ's agony in the garden, his prayer that the cup of suffering might pass from him. That evening, Sister Catherine found me with wonderful news. Queen Isabella wishes to expand our foundation. Mother Superior has recommended you to travel to York and establish a new house there. 'Tis a great honor. My heart sank. York was hundreds of miles from London. If I accepted, it would effectively end any possibility of seeing Henry again. Yet what choice did I have? To refuse would raise questions I could never answer. That night, I knelt in my cell for private prayer. If you truly wish me to serve you, I prayed, then give me a sign. The sign came before dawn. Sister Catherine woke me with urgent knocking. Sister Marguerite, you must come at once. There has been an accident. I followed her through dark corridors toward the guest wing. 'Tis the king, she whispered. He took ill in the night, a fever that came upon him suddenly. The physicians fear it may be poison. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. We reached the guest quarters to find them in controlled turmoil. Queen Isabella turned with visible relief when she saw us. Sister Marguerite, I have heard that you are skilled in medicinal herbs. The physicians have done all they can, but the fever will not break. I beg you, if there is anything that might help. She led me into the king's chamber. Henry lay upon the great bed, his face flushed with fever, his breathing labored. My heart clenched with anguish at seeing him thus. Have the physicians considered willow bark tea? I asked. We have tried everything, one of them replied wearily. As my fingers closed around the pendant beneath my habit, a memory surfaced from my childhood. My mother had used an old remedy for similar symptoms. There is one thing we might try, I said. A preparation made from marshmallow root, combined with honey and certain herbs. Try anything, Queen Isabella said desperately. I spent the next hour in frantic preparation, sending servants to gather the necessary plants. As I worked, grinding roots and steeping herbs, I prayed with an intensity I had never known before. For the next day and night, I maintained vigil beside his bed, administering the remedy at regular intervals. Queen Isabella remained as well, and I found myself developing unexpected sympathy for this gentle woman, who loved her husband with quiet devotion. You care greatly for our king's welfare, she observed during the night watch. All of England cares for his welfare, Your Majesty, I replied carefully. Yes, but there is something different in your dedication. She studied me, as one who loves him. "I am pledged to serve God through service to others, Your Majesty." She simply nodded and returned her attention to her husband. Near dawn on the second day, Henry's fever finally broke. I was dozing when I heard him stir, and opened my eyes to find his gaze fixed upon me with perfect clarity. "Marguerite," he whispered. "Hush," I murmured, glancing toward where Queen Isabella slept. "You must rest. The fever has broken, but you are still weak." "I dreamed I was dying," he said softly. "And in my dream, you were there, holding my hand. 'Twas no dream that I was here, but you are not dying. The crisis has passed." He caught my hand in his. "Then I have been given another chance, another opportunity to find the courage to live the life God intends for me." Queen Isabella stirred and opened her eyes. Seeing her husband awake, she hurried to his side. "Henry." "Oh, praise be to God." "Indeed I have," he replied, "and I have much to be grateful for, not least the skill and devotion of Sister Marguerite." Queen Isabella turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Sister, you have saved not just a king, but a husband. How can we ever repay such a debt?" "No repayment is needed, Your Majesty." The royal party remained another week while Henry regained his strength. On the morning of their departure, Henry approached me one final time. "Sister Marguerite," he said formally, "Her Majesty and I have discussed your situation. We would have you remain here as the permanent head of this house, with authority to expand its mission as you see fit. You will have resources at your disposal, and the freedom to pursue whatever forms of service you feel called to undertake." It was a magnificent offer, one that would give me independence and meaningful work. But I also understood the deeper invitation. By remaining here, I would be accessible to him. "Your Majesty is most generous," I replied. "I accept this appointment with gratitude and humility. Then it is settled. We shall visit often to observe the progress of your work." As the royal party rode away, I stood in the courtyard long after they had disappeared. I was thinking of the choice I had just made, to remain within Henry's orbit, to love him from a respectful distance, to find what happiness I could in stolen moments and unspoken understanding. The years that followed brought their own rhythms. The foundation flourished under my leadership. Henry kept his promise to visit regularly, always with proper ceremony. We developed a language of glances and gestures that allowed us to communicate what words could never safely convey. Queen Isabella proved a gracious patron. She bore Henry 3 sons and a daughter, fulfilling her royal duties with quiet dignity. If she ever suspected the deeper currents between her husband and me, she never spoke of it. There were difficult moments, times when the restraint required seemed more than either of us could bear. One Christmas, when Henry placed a leather-bound book of poetry in my hands, our fingers brushed for just an instant, and the contact sent fire racing through my veins. That night, I found a note tucked between the pages. "Though we may not speak of it openly, know that every sunrise brings me joy, because somewhere in the world, you greet the same dawn. This is enough. It must be enough. Yet still my heart whispers your name." As the years passed, I began to understand the wisdom in the path we had chosen. Our love, constrained by duty, had taken on a quality that purely earthly passion could never achieve. It had been refined by sacrifice, purified by renunciation, until it became something both intensely personal and mysteriously universal. It was in my 50th year that Henry came with news that would change everything. Queen Isabella had died in childbirth. "I grieve for her truly," he told me as we walked in the rose garden. His hair was silver now, yet he was still the man who had captured my heart. "As do I replied honestly. "She was a good woman. The physicians say I am unlikely to father more children," he continued quietly. "My sons are grown. For the first time in my life, I am free to consider what my heart desires, rather than what the realm requires." I stopped walking and turned to face him. "I am saying that if you would have me, I would make you my wife, not in secret, but openly before God and all the world." After all these years of careful restraint, he was offering me everything I had ever dreamed of. Yet, as I looked into his beloved face, I found myself thinking not of the joy such a union would bring, but of the price it would exact. "And what of our foundation?" I asked quietly. "What of the work we have built here? All of that could continue. As queen, you would have even greater resources." "But not as myself," I pointed out. "As your queen, I would belong first to the crown. The quiet work of teaching and healing would give way to the public duties of royalty." He was silent for a long moment. "You speak truly. To be queen would change everything about your life." I took his hands in mine. My beloved Henry, what we have shared has been more precious to me than any crown or title could ever be. You have been the great love of my life, the joy that sustained me through every difficulty. As you have been to me, then let that be enough, I continued, though the words cost me dearly. Let us not risk tarnishing what we have built by grasping for what the world might think we deserve. Our love has been purified by renunciation, made sacred by sacrifice. He stared at me for a long moment. You would give up the chance to be my wife, to spend our remaining years in open companionship? I would preserve what we have rather than risk losing it to the demands of what we might become. Our love has been a thing apart, belonging neither fully to earth nor entirely to heaven. In that liminal space, it has found its truest expression. Henry lifted our joined hands to his lips. Then we shall continue as we have, loving from a distance, finding joy in constraint, serving others through our sacrifice. Yes, I whispered, we shall continue. And so we did, for another 15 years, until Henry passed peacefully in his sleep. I learned of his death through official channels and attended his funeral as the head of a religious foundation should. But that night, alone in my cell, I wept for the loss of the great love of my life. Now, as I set down my quill after recording this account, I am an old woman with silver hair and hands marked by decades of honest work. The foundation continues to thrive, and I find great satisfaction in knowing that the love Henry and I shared has borne fruit in the lives of countless others we have served. Tomorrow, I will take my final vows, not as a young woman fleeing from the world's harsh realities, but as one who has known both its greatest joys and deepest sorrows, and chosen to dedicate whatever years remain in service of something greater than myself. The silver rose pendant still rests against my heart, tarnished now with age but still beautiful. It reminds me that some loves are too pure to be possessed, too sacred to be claimed, too perfect to need the validation of earthly institutions. If this tale hath touched thy heart, bestow thy favor upon this video, subscribe to the channel, and share thy thoughts in the comments. To hear the next tale, click upon the box to the left.